A warm greeting to all of you joining this conference. Welcome to this course on self-knowledge. Today, we're going to talk about a topic called return and recurrence. This is a particularly fascinating subject because it can help us answer some questions that many of us have probably asked ourselves at one point or another. For example, today's topic will shed light on the phenomenon known as déjà vu. That strange sensation of having already seen or experienced something, even though we know rationally that we haven't. Like visiting a place for the first time and feeling as if we've already been there. Or meeting someone new and instantly feeling a deep connection, as if we've known them forever. Or the opposite, feeling an immediate dislike or aversion to someone we've just met, without any clear reason. Today, through the study of these two laws, we'll uncover the real cause behind these kinds of experiences. We'll also talk about successive lives, past lives, and explore whether they're real or just an idea. And most importantly, we'll look into how we can change or transform our destiny. So, as you can see, this will be a very interesting topic. To begin, we're going to explore how the laws of return and recurrence work. These are two of the 48 laws that govern the physical world, and we are going to learn how to transcend them. But let's begin by reflecting on something important. A person is what their life is. If someone doesn't change anything within themselves, if they don't radically transform their way of living, if they don't work on themselves, then they are simply wasting their time, miserably. If we're here right now listening to this conference, following this course, or searching for topics related to the awakening of consciousness, it's because we've reached a certain point in life. A point where something deep inside us is urging us to change, to transform ourselves from within. We've come to that mathematical point in our lives where we begin to question our own existence. We begin to realize that if we continue living the way we have been, we won't ever reach or even understand the deeper, transcendental purpose of our lives. That's why, if we truly want to move forward, if we want to begin waking up, we must spark a revolution within ourselves. We must create deep, radical change in our lives. Otherwise, we'll just keep wasting time, miserably, just as we've done, existence after existence. Once we understand that this inner transformation is necessary, the next step is to discover what it is that keeps us stuck. What makes us keep acting the same way, repeating the same mistakes, living the same lessons over and over again, without ever truly transcending them. Let's begin, then, by studying what the law of return really is. The word return literally means to turn again. So what this law teaches us is that everything moves in cycles. Everything repeats. It's the law behind all rotation. We can see it in nature. The earth turns on its axis, creating day and night, and once that turn is complete, it starts all over again. The earth also turns around the sun, creating the 4 seasons, and once that cycle ends, it begins again. But here's what we need to understand. This law doesn't just apply to planets and nature. It also governs us. The law of return is what keeps us trapped in the mechanical process of dying and being born, over and over again, life after life. We can observe that life, with all its stages, is like a wheel. We're born, we grow up, maybe we reproduce, we grow old, and then we die. And we tend to believe that when we die, everything ends. But the truth is, it doesn't. Death is simply the return to the starting point of life itself, with the possibility of living it all over again. As we explained in Conference 8, where we talked about evolution and involution on the wheel of samsara, we said that each soul has 3,000 cycles to reach self-realization. 3,000 turns on that wheel, passing through the different kingdoms of nature. And once we reach the human kingdom in any of those cycles, we are given the opportunity to live 108 human lives. And between each of those lives, there is always a process of return. So, what exactly is that process? Well, when our physical body dies, we go through a kind of judgment, a trial. During this process, all the actions we took in our previous life are weighed. And based on that, the consequences for our next life are determined. After this, we wait, in what's traditionally called limbo, until the right conditions come together for us to be born again. That means, the people who will become our parents must meet, fall in love, get married, or go through whatever process leads them to sexual union. And in that moment of union, the physical body that will become ours begins to form. It's the body our inner spark, our essence, will connect to so we can return to physical life. But it's not just the essence that returns. Our psychological defects also return from one life to the other. But here's something interesting to know. We often return through the seed of our own descendants. In many cases, we come back into the same family tree. For example, a grandmother who passed away a few years ago might return as the little niece who was just born. If that soul hasn't yet exhausted the 108 human lives available in this cycle, its spark will continue to return through the family line. Now, if someone has exhausted their 108 human lives without doing the necessary inner work to awaken their consciousness, they will still continue to return, but this time through the lower kingdoms of nature. So, if that grandmother had no more rights to return as a human in this cycle, she might now come back through the animal kingdom. And it's entirely possible that she could show up in our home as a pet, like a dog or a cat, one that often shows very human behaviors. If we perform a conscious astral projection and investigate who that pet was in their past human life, we might be genuinely surprised by what we discover. We may even confirm, without a doubt, the truth of what we're saying here. Through the technique of astral projection, which we covered in Conference 3, we can verify whether successive lives truly exist. We can ask our inner being to show us which of the 108 lives we're currently living in this cycle. We can also ask to be shown one of our past lives, or even to witness the trial process that takes place between one life and the next. And if we have the necessary merits, we will be shown these things, and we will come to see for ourselves that the law of return is real. But it's very important to understand that return is not the same as reincarnation. These two concepts are often confused. Return is what happens to us, to ordinary people. We die and we're born again, pushed by a mechanical law, because our consciousness is still asleep. And since we're asleep, we have no control over how, where, or under what conditions we return. Reincarnation, on the other hand, is something very different. It's a voluntary process, experienced only by beings who have already awakened their consciousness. These are people who have worked on themselves, who have achieved a deep level of inner development. At the moment of death, they remain fully aware of what's happening. They are conscious of leaving the physical body. And because of their level of awakening, they can choose when, where, and under what conditions they will return, in order to continue their spiritual work. Now let's take a look at the law of recurrence. The word recurrence simply means something that happens again. And just like the law of return causes us to come back to this world again and again, until we do the inner work necessary to transcend that law, the law of recurrence causes us to repeat the same life lessons, over and over, until we finally learn the wisdom hidden within each situation. So, this is the law that makes everything mechanically repeat itself, again and again. In this physical life, events occur, and then sooner or later, they happen again in cycles. So, because we are subject to this law, the life of each one of us, with all its phases, is always the same, repeating itself over and over, life after life, through countless centuries. Each of our lives is like a living film. When we die, we take that film with us into eternity. We carry it with us, and then we bring it back to play again on the screen of a new existence. Each situation that arises in our life is like a different scene in that film. We believe that we're the ones directing our life, making decisions, but we fail to realize how we're actually just repeating the same actions, the same mistakes, the same circumstances, over and over, from one life to the next. We've been visiting the same places, meeting the same souls, going through the same situations, only made more intense by the consequences of those actions. And that's why we sometimes experience things we feel like we've already lived through, or meet people and instantly feel like we know them, even though we've never interacted with them before. It's the reason for déjà vu, and even for what we call premonition. It's because we've been living that same situation so many times, that it's etched in the memory of our waters, even if we don't consciously remember it. Once we come to understand this and see it for ourselves, we realize that our destiny is already written. Nothing that happens to us happens by chance. The repetition of dramas, comedies, and tragedies is a key principle of the law of recurrence. In each new life, the same circumstances are always repeated. And the actors in those scenes, the ones who keep showing up, are the eyes that live within us. If we were to disintegrate those actors, those eyes, that keep creating the same scenes over and over, then the repetition of those circumstances would become impossible. Obviously, without actors, there can be no scenes. It's really important for us to reflect on this, because understanding this will shed light on how we can start to change our lives. The The truth is, many people live inside of us. We have the illusion that we are just one person. But when we begin to observe ourselves, we realize that psychologically, we are actually many different people. Each of these people has their own way of thinking, feeling, and acting. For example, one moment we may feel happy, optimistic, and full of courage, thinking that everything is going to be fine. Then, another moment we might feel sad, discouraged, and believe that nothing will go right. At another time, we might feel angry, thinking only about revenge or attacking. And in certain situations, we may find ourselves consumed by lust, seeking only sexual satisfaction. We are not a single, conscious individual. We are a collection of psychological defects, many different ways of being, that emerge depending on the circumstances we face, leading us to repeat the same dramas, the same tragedies, the same comedies, life after life. It's crucial to observe and understand this, because only by disintegrating each of these ways of being can we free ourselves from the cycle of recurrence, and from all the commitments these I's have made with others throughout our various existences. When we seriously reflect on the law of recurrence, the repetition of scenes in each new return, we begin to discover, through deep self-observation, the secret springs of this issue. For example, if in our past life, at the age of 25, we had a romantic relationship, it's clear that the I connected to that experience will look for the same partner at the same age in this new life. If the partner in that past life was 15 years old, the I tied to that experience will look for them again at the same age in this new life. It's easy to understand that these two I's, his and hers, are telepathically drawn to each other, and they will meet once again to repeat the same love story from the past. Similarly, if two people were enemies in a previous life, fighting to the death, they will be drawn to each other again in the new life, to repeat that same tragedy at the corresponding age. If two people had a dispute over property at the age of 40 in their past life, they will seek each other out telepathically in the new life, at the same age, to repeat that same conflict. As we can see, our psychological defects are telepathically connected, drawing us into the same patterns and repeating the same recurrences. Sometimes we feel an urge to change our path, visit a certain place, or speak to a specific person. And the other person may feel the same way. We don't realize that these are the same psychological defects that led us, in a past life, to live through those very same circumstances. Each of our psychological defects carries numerous commitments, and none of these commitments will help us awaken consciousness or free us from this cycle. On the contrary, they manipulate us through desire and our mind, ensuring that we fall into the same situations where they can manifest and feed off our energy. Life after life, we become mere puppets of our defects. We go through life dragged by circumstances, never denying ourselves the desires tied to these defects. We unwittingly fulfill each commitment, all while living under the illusion that we are in control of our lives. Within each of us, there are many different people, each with their own commitments to fulfill. Our lustful selves, created many lives ago, carry their own sexual commitments. Our deceitful eyes bring their own obligations. Our violent, tyrannical, and submissive selves each bring theirs. Every vice has set its own timeline in this existence, dictating when it will manifest, how often, and in what form. The most concerning part about all this is that the intellect ignores the existence of such people or I's within us and of such commitments that are fatally fulfilled. Our personality is merely the instrument through which different I's fulfill their commitments. Each of these I's uses our personality to carry out its own desires. We are like miserable logs, helplessly carried by the raging waves of existence. When life presents us with sad situations, we cry. When it offers us happy moments, we laugh. When we face violent situations, we get angry. And when lustful situations arise, we become sexually aroused. But we never stop to reflect. We never take control of our emotions, desires, thoughts, or actions. The only way to escape this misfortune, this unconscious state in which we find ourselves, is by dying in ourselves. If we truly want to change our destiny, if we want our consciousness to guide every action of our lives, we must disintegrate each of these I's, or selves, each of these ways of being. To begin modifying our destiny and having a new, conscious life focused on awakening our consciousness, we must first learn to observe ourselves. This self-observation allows us to discover the psychological defects that manifest through our desires and thoughts. These defects communicate telepathically with the defects in others, driving us to seek certain people, do certain things, or engage in certain actions. For example, let's say we have a partner, and we understand the importance of fidelity in achieving spiritual birth. But we may have a recurrence of adultery from a past life. In this case, our adulterous defect carries a commitment to another person. As this recurrence unfolds, a telepathic communication begins to occur between our lustful defect and the corresponding defect in another person. This leads to desires arising within us, which also start to stir in the other person, a desire to flirt, talk, or connect. If we are self-observing, we can recognize these psychological reactions as they begin to manifest within us. We must also observe how our personality plays a role. Our personality, whether social, shy, violent, narcissistic, or submissive, will help facilitate the manifestation of certain defects and their recurrences in this life. For example, if we have a recurrence of conflict, we can observe the magnetism that arises. There may be a person we dislike, with whom we have this fighting recurrence. In our self-observation, we can identify the eyes that create feelings of displeasure and antipathy toward this person. These eyes will communicate telepathically with the eyes in the other person, setting the stage for this recurrence to happen. If we have ingrained in our personality the belief that we cannot allow ourselves to be humiliated by anyone, our personality will push us into a situation where this recurrence takes place. These events happen without our conscious awareness. We think we are acting, but in reality, things are happening to us. This is mechanical, fatal. However, if we practice self-observation, we can identify the desires and personality traits that trigger our mistakes. By becoming reflective, we can observe those subtle details that usually pass unnoticed. If we refuse to act on the egoic desires, and we ask our Divine Mother to help us disintegrate those desires, those obsessions, and all the thoughts, emotions, and bodily reactions we observe, we can free ourselves from the recurrence and avoid falling into the mechanical traps of our ego. The 3 factors for the revolution of consciousness are the keys to our liberation, liberating our consciousness so we can begin acting freely and consciously. Psychological death allows us to eliminate all our negative ways of being, the actors, who by law of recurrence, have to appear on the screen of our lives to lead us to continue making the same mistakes. This process of psychological death helps us to start freeing and awakening our consciousness. With spiritual birth, we make wise use of our sexual energy, allowing us to condense the released essence in our spinal cord, ensuring that it is not captured by the ego again. Through sacrifice for humanity, we can work to settle the karmic debts accumulated from the harmful actions our defects led us to commit, actions that contributed to the recurrences in our lives. By working on ourselves and practicing the 3 factors, we free ourselves. When we disintegrate the various defects that keep us bound to the endless repetition of circumstances and mistakes, we liberate ourselves from the law of recurrence. As we free and awaken all our consciousness, we are also liberated from the law of return, because we will no longer need to repeat this cycle of life. We will have already reached the goal, self-realization, which is total liberation. And those who truly awaken gain full objectivity of their consciousness, achieving authentic illumination and happiness. This concludes today's topic. Remember, you can leave any questions, and we will be happy to answer them. The next topic we will study will focus on the laws of karma and dharma. In this, we will learn everything about these 2 laws and how to negotiate and cancel our karmas. Until next time.